All right. If you still want John to buy you a beer, clap once. No? If you still want John to buy you 2 beers, clap twice. All right. Very good. Very good. So we're going to move on to our last panel of the day. So we've had a lot of discussion about framing blended learning up front. What is blended learning? How do we think about it? Talked about the strategic objectives in implementing blended learning. What problem are you trying to solve? What are you trying to achieve by implementing blended learning? Talked about some of the different models and seen some of the videos to see what are different ways to make this happen. And then just now I've had the session really looking at some of the content and the technology. How do we think about the different types of software, how to structure it, open resources, et cetera. So the rubber hits the road now when it's time to implement. And so how do we actually make that happen? What are the things we need to do to help make implementation successful? And how do we think about continuous improvement, change management? And again, one of the things I think we want to do for sure, again, with this group, we've got diverse backgrounds and experiences, is to make sure that you get to drive the session as much as possible. And I think especially now, since you've seen the whole range of the content and the topics today, to really enable you to sort of sit back and say, what else do I want to know about implementation to help me be successful? So we've got a panel here, again, it's got a lot of great backgrounds and a lot of diversity. And the way we're going to run this is just ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves and talk a little bit about implementation, change management, the work that they've done in the lessons, and then I'm going to open it up for questions and try and maximize the amount of time we have for questions. If necessary, I'll ask a few to keep things moving along, because I think there's a lot of richness in the implementation discussion, but really want to make sure this meets your needs as your last chance today to ask the questions of a group around how to help make implementation successful. So if we could please just start right here and just kind of work our way across a little bit about yourself, your experience with change management and implementation.
Sure. My name is George Welsh. I'm superintendent of schools in Center, Colorado. And you guys are like, where's that? It's down in the San Luis Valley, about 30 miles north and to the west of Alamosa. You have to be going to Center to get there. We have about 600 kids. I can go a little bit further back, though. I thought based on an introduction and especially thinking about what the world has become. I started teaching in 1986, my first experience with a computer was a Commodore VIC-20. Was anyone out there even? Yeah, all right. Yeah, which means I'm really not slick because that was packaged. It was attempting probably to be an Apple. I wasn't building computers and such. I was just trying to have ease of use, as I can show by my Apple iPhone. My first personal computer was portable. I know it was portable because it had a handle on it, and that was an Apple II. Apple IIe actually is what they were. But as far as an educator, starting 17 years ago in Center, we had I was fortunate to come into a district that had just put in a network. Had put desktops into every classroom, and we were trying to figure out, where to go from there. And I won't go deep into answering all the questions, but what I'm saying is I've had 26, 27 years to see, what people thought computer-assisted learning was going to look like at so many different generations, and I'm amazed at. Just absolutely amazed at what's available right now and where this thing may be going. So look forward to answering some of your questions about that. Center School District, as I said, has 600 students. Currently, we have a K through 3 one-to-one iPad program. 4th and 5th graders each have a designated lap book about the size of a netbook, laptop about the size of a netbook. They're not allowed to bring those home. And then 6th through 12th grade, we have a one-to-one laptop program for our students. And we've been dabbling in this for, I was just discussing with my director of instruction, 8 years now. So we've brought opportunities for students to do blended learning to our district and have been doing it for quite a while.
Hello, Kurt Levesser with Boulder Valley School District. It says I'm a principal up there with Boulder Universal is the name of our virtual school. Started that 3 years ago. Don't do a whole lot with Boulder Universal anymore. I'm still the name still sticks with principal, but I'm more the director of online learning now. So it's kind of to start. we had a couple years ago, for us, we started in blended learning about 3 years ago now, and it was we had a grant with Enhancing Education Through Technology, E2T2 grant that we shared with Thompson School District, and that was really our first introduction to what is blended learning. And then, so we had enough money to pilot some things and try some things out and acquire a learning management system that we knew nothing about, and just start working around what is it, what's the definition of it, how can you package it and sell it to a school and a principal, because the principal is the gatekeeper. And one way around the gatekeeper is to start just grassroots things with a teacher here, a teacher there, and that was the tact we took, because teachers principals are sometimes tough to sell. So, and the other thing is I'm really fortunate to have the guy that was sitting in this seat just a little while ago. Bruce is a pretty phenomenal educational leader, so pretty fortunate that he's kind of given a lot of green lights to things and projects that I have an interest in doing. But the grant really helped us get started. It helped us put some vocabulary, kind of like the expanded learning opportunities. Grant helped some 40 some other districts put language to what is blended learning. And what we got from the grant wasn't so great as far as the results that we saw from teachers. And so we had 24 teachers from our district and about 16 from Thompson that were doing it, so about 40 altogether. And the results weren't like, wow, this is phenomenal. Wow, blended learning is the next on high type of thing that's just going to be awesome. What we learned is really how not to really do it. And I think that was more important. It was the risk taking, that teachers were willing to take the risk. Some of those teachers, more than half of those teachers are still doing blended learning today, and we've tried to keep supporting them, and they've been developing some of their own content and kind of struggling along. Well, now what's happened is they've been getting more and more successful every year. We had to start on the path. If you don't ever get on the path, you're never going to get to where you want to be. So though it wasn't a great experience, it was an experience to get us going. And now those teachers are kind of infesting with other teachers, and now they're starting to share more, and they're starting to see good results around schools. And so one school in particular, Monarch High School, which is it's a high achieving school, they have been probably the most consistent of staying with blended learning, and they want a full school implementation next year. And for us, that's 1,600 students, and that's they have the teacher buy-in, the principal is willing to lead it. I mean, everything you want. It's set up just perfectly. It's just on the tee right there. But that happened 3 years ago, and just a few teachers at that building really spread it across. So sometimes it's better just to get it going and then let it work, because if you get in there too much, you can screw it up. So, and just keep trying to support the grassroots efforts so you make sure it's successful, and then it can grow. So.
Hey everyone, Scott Benson. I'm with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I'm on a team that we call Next Generation Learning, and our team focuses on various aspects, both the demand school side, the supply side, really trying to spur the development of the kinds of content and tools that are necessary for blended learning to take root. And we also do some work in policy advocacy, as well as some infrastructure work here in Colorado. The In Bloom project is something my team has funded as well. So my focus, though, is fairly narrowly, and thankfully so, on schools and what we call personalized school models. So I've had the good benefit of being able, at a national level, to fund a number of the innovative schools that we see coming online. We have taken, in large part, through the Next Generation Learning Challenges, which you guys have a blue sheet of paper, I believe. It could be orange, it could be green, but some color sheet of paper that has NGLC at the top. It's called the Next Generation Learning Challenges Wave 4. That's a grant program that we funded. It's a continuation of something that we did last year that awarded 20 launch grants to new schools, both in the charter and the district sector, that were really innovating on a whole school level in a lot of the ways that we've talked about today. We've also re-upped, as I mentioned, Wave 4, and that's something that is active right now. It's an RFP that is out on the street at the moment. The first deadline is April 22nd. So if you guys walk away from this session and say, wow, I've got to really go do this, whether it's in the context of a new school or in the context of a school that really has the capacity to change from within, like it sounds like the school that Kurt just mentioned, please take a look at that RFP and see if it applies. But the reason I bring that up, and that's a kind of a microcosm of some of our other grant programs out that we're using to support the kind of the movement in this direction around the country. I mean, implementation, I would say right now is messy. So, I mean, that's the main thing it's still upon you guys, which is if you think that all is going to be roses and you're going to find the perfect IT solution that's going to marry all of the digital content providers out there and assessment providers, that everything is going to be aligned to the Common Core and that your students are going to grow 5 grade levels per year on an annual basis because of blended learning, then it's not going to happen, right? So just know that. But if you are willing to innovate, if you're willing to step out there and kind of take some punches, then there is a lot of opportunity. And fortunately, there are, I think, enough people both within Colorado and nationally that have come before you that have taken some bruises that you might be able to learn from. So I'm not going to go into depth on implementations, but there are a couple resources both produced by the Next Generation Learning Challenges team. Some of the profiles that you saw today on Touchstone and USC Hybrid High and some of those other schools were produced by that team. There are a series of 20 of those profiles. The Michael and Susan Dell Foundation did a series of 5 really detailed case studies on blended learning implementations. So that's another resource that's really in depth. And then there are a number of videos and so forth that are out there. But I mean, the main messages are it's messy. Content isn't going to be perfect, but it's good enough to get started. And the idea that I think was reinforced by others in the panel is you've got to start somewhere, right? A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So if you have an inclination of doing this, certainly it now is the time to be able to take that step. But I would do it in a way that shields you to some degree from some of the constraints that might be in place in traditional classrooms and so forth. So, for example, School of One started as a summer school program, right? It was a very bold approach to middle school math, as opposed to trying to start in a traditional math class with existing teachers. They used those existing teachers, but did it in a summer school context where they had a lot more flexibility to be able to implement, whether it's in a summer school program, an after school program, that kind of thing. If you're just looking to take the first steps, I would highly recommend taking those as your first steps as opposed to trying to reinvent school from within, because I think you might butt up against a lot of challenges if you try to reinvent a comprehensive high school from ground one. So I'll stop there. I'm eager to get questions, particularly from practitioners. But most of all, I direct you to the people out there that are actually doing this work. And really, I think there's a lot to learn from some of the people that have taken those first steps. So thanks.
Can I go ahead and apply for that grant?
April 22nd.
All right. It'll be in there. Alex Magana, the principal at Grant Beacon Middle School. My background is accounting and finance. And then I decided to be a math teacher, and then a math coach, and assistant principal, and then principal. We implemented the blended learning model last year. We were working extremely hard. Our teachers were working extremely hard. We were producing results in certain areas, but we weren't. The problem that we were running into is we weren't meeting the needs of all the kids. We at Grant Beacon, it's like many schools, are at 85% free and reduced lunch, 80% Hispanic, 30-40% second language learners. And people were working extremely hard, but we weren't getting the results. And that's the frustrating part, because we need to produce results. When I came last year, we were just gathering ideas of what we can do. With the support of the staff and the community and parents and teachers, we redesigned the whole school. And we said, what do we need to do? So we started with a blank sheet of paper. What do we need to do to get here? And I kept going back to that blank sheet of paper. The blended learning model allowed for that flexibility. I think this has been we've had a very successful year. We're further ahead than we've ever been. It helps when you have a common mission and a vision with your staff and in the community. It helps when you see students engaged. I think that's the number one thing. That's a big takeaway is we should not we should not hold kids back. I mean, the technology is there. They're already learning from the technology, so why isn't it clearly apparent in the schools? Why aren't we using that to facilitate learning as opposed to stifling our students in their learning process? So, but working with the staff, we set up 2 separate models. We set a rotation model with the reading and math, we said this is how it's going to be, and this after hard conversations of what we're going to do. We brought in a program. We said, okay, this is what we're going to do, because the number one strategy intervention that I only heard a couple times today was small group instruction. That's where you get the biggest impact from there. So we did that in the reading and math components, and then for the other classes, we did more of a flex model. And the last thing that we did is, in order to do that, it's not about the hardware. And that's being clear on that one. It's about having the systems in place and the infrastructure. So it helped when we set up a learning management system and we used the Moodle. And now what's happening is teachers are creating this very powerful system through the learning management system, and teachers are starting to learn to differentiate and learn how to break their activities up. So more students are engaged. Kids are discussing things in groups, utilizing the technology. And then for next year, we're working on how do we turn around that data and give our students more data immediately so we can respond to it. So that's what we're doing at Grant Beacon Middle School.
Michael Thompson, I'm the academic director at Education Elements, and if you haven't heard, we're a solutions provider in blended learning, everything from the consulting side, looking at how to plan and design a particular model for blended learning, select the right content, support through professional development, and then the software, the technology to manage the different educational technology elements, content providers, and data as well. And it's been exciting to work in this space. It's about 2 years. Well, we're a little over 2 years old now as an organization, and it's amazing to kind of look in just 2 years, which seems like a short time, but yet looking back to 2 years ago, most people hadn't really heard of blended learning. If they had, they didn't really know exactly what it meant. And you hear blended, a lot of times you would just think virtual or online, and to now really have a more robust definition and great models and examples of blended learning happening all over the country. Seeing some of the schools that we worked with from the early stages when it was just an idea to now 2 or 3 years into existence already. I think what's been mentioned a little bit, and I know Scott mentioned too in the intro to the panel. Anytime you're making a change like this, whether it's starting a brand new school or transforming an existing school, that change management process is huge. And even if it's a pilot you're starting with, it's small, or if you're doing a whole school transformation, thinking through what are the goals and objectives first, and targeting your plan, your design, your content selection always back to those goals, and looking at how that process is really rolled out with the staff so that the buy-in is there and so the support is there. I think you can't underestimate how much of a transformation and how much of a overall change this is to teachers and staff, and to support that throughout. And I think that is where really successful implementations of blended learning exist, is where that is carefully thought through, as opposed to, oh, we've got iPads, let's just throw them in the classroom, or I've heard this is great, I want to buy this digital content, let's try it. That doesn't have the same sustainability as a very carefully thought through plan. And it's why opportunities like the Next Generation Learning Challenge force you to think through that. And I think it's a very good opportunity. And I think any kind of change like this needs to be well thought through and well planned in the process.
Great. Okay, so as you hear, we've got, again, a sort of wide variety of types of experience, different levels, and different types of challenges. And so I think I'd like to stop here and let's open it up as you think about the things that you've seen so far in your discussions today and your conversations with your teams. What questions do you have where you can take advantage of these people's experience to help you in your own implementation planning? All right, so I've given you enough little think time. I'll seed it, but then again, I'm counting on you guys to continue to move this forward. You got to take charge of your own learning here, right? So maybe George, if we talk a little bit about.
We got a question.
All right, very good. Thank you. I was going to have to make up something, and it wasn't going to be about blended learning. So thank you.
I just wanted to ask George, with the students all having that much technology, how do you handle the damage that's caused to technology by little kids and so forth?
That's a great question. And by the way, that's that was one of the first hurdles we dealt with in terms of putting technology in kids' hands. We're a 90% poverty district, 50% English language learner population, 33% migrant population. So we're not exactly putting these devices in the hands of kids who the public perception is that we'll take the greatest care of them. And so if we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to put devices in kids' hands, how are we going to guarantee that they're going to be taken care of? Do the research first, and the research will tell you, especially with a child of poverty, that given an opportunity to have a device like this, they do take care of it. It is the most valuable thing in their life. You know, we've got kids who live in, you know, mobile homes that I wouldn't let dogs live in, and they are not going to be willy-nilly with this device. Overall, the year, what we explored insurance companies when we first did the laptop program, and of course we did it the same when we started the tablet program. And insurance companies will kill you. I mean, they're going to want to charge you something like $120 a year for a kid to insure a device that 3 years into it's going to be go from being worth $1,200 down to about $600. So we started our own insurance. We're a small district. We started our own insurance program. We ask the kids at the secondary level where they get the laptops to pitch in $45. And once again, 90% of them are free or reduced lunch. They'll come up with $45 to get access to their device. The iPads, we're asking for $25. We put it into a fund, and that fund actually pays for additional technology support. If we have a problem with a device, it's an extra person, a full-time person at like $22,000 a year who can actually help repair devices. You get the typical warranty that's available for devices, and so if you have something that's a warranty item, you ship it off, you get it back. But we have very little damage. We have very little theft. And then we've developed people in our organization who can, you know, take a laptop apart and put it all the way back together. We're good on eBay. You know, you can find a Dell case or screen or keyboard or whatever, and get a, you know, buy a part for. And then we also buy uniforms so that when one device is just about out of use, you can cannibalize it and share the parts out with others. And all I can say is that is one of the first things people will throw out at you as to why you should not do it. And the research, if you actually look into the research and you're thoughtful about your policies and you're thoughtful about your communication, you will find that's the least of your worries. We have a harder time collecting textbooks than we have collecting, you know, computers and things like that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. That's okay. George, will you talk about how you funded that initially?
So what I've heard a lot being said here is kind of a good way to get a program started is to take that first step. And a good way to take a first step is to do a pilot. And what we did all the way back, I think it was 8 years ago, our pilot was we bought laptops for sophomores. And I'm going to tell you, I'm the stupidest superintendent in the world because I had a junior and a senior in school. And I'm going to tell you why I'm really even more stupid is we piloted, we kind of consider this a pilot year with the iPads, and we piloted it up to third grade, and guess what I got? A fourth grader. So I just don't know how to get benefit from my own kids. But by putting it in the hands of a small group of people and then building it up, it helps. And at that time where we did the pilot, it was a big time first investment. We had to buy a full class worth of grade levels worth of computers. But the way we built it up in the high school is the sophomores kept them the next year. We bought them for the next year's sophomores. Sophomores, juniors had them. We bought them for the next year's sophomores. And then the economy went in the tank, and we got a gigantic chunk of ERA money, and that's where we put our ERA money, was to get all the way down to sixth grade and such. And so you got to build on it. A secondary answer to that is this: is you can't go from an attitude where I'm going to get devices for everybody. And then maybe if the money's there in 4, 5, 6 years, and you know what happens with technology in that time, maybe we'll get another shot and replace all the devices. It's got to be an annual figure in your budget. And here's the rotation we have set up right now, and I'm sure it'll change, is you buy a new device for a kindergartner, you expect that to go, and we're going to eventually hope that goes through 4th, maybe 5th grade, we'll see. You buy a new device for a 6th grader, they use that all for middle school. You buy a new device for a 9th grader, and they use that all for high school. And so I'm buying 3 or 4 grade levels worth of devices. I can't buy 12 grade levels worth of devices at once. And so, of course, we've got our 4th and 5th graders this year. I just got a stack of letters this year. Why can't we, next year we need to have iPads, and here's why, and so some kids are unfortunately after the wave, but you just got to be thoughtful about that. It's affordable. In fact, what I've got written on my notes is a $, it is, quite frankly, I'll sit down with you. I can convince you that it's cheaper to get the devices to then get access to the fantastic content that everybody's talking about than it is to buy textbooks. And we're all still buying textbooks.
So Alex or Kurt, do you guys have thoughts from your side on terms of the funding and the kind of deployment process that you use there?
I would say look what you have in the building. I mean, one of the things is we reallocated all of our resources. I took down a computer lab that was sitting there because you're losing transition time. I mean, the time is being there. It's sitting there most of the time. And so for the rotation model, we started with 6th grade, and you talked about kids being a little rough on the computers. Well, we put the desktops in the computer in the 6th graders classrooms, and that allowed us to have a complete structure in place. But I first looked at how the computers or the technology that we had in the building was being used, and then we reallocated. So we tore down one computer lab. I still have one other computer lab and computers in the library, but it was important to get the computers in the classroom, more than 2 that sit in the back of the corner. It had to be a considerable amount to create that small group. 15, we went for 15. I would have been happy with 10.
We went with Monarch High School. Went to 2 years ago. They went to bring your own device, and so they started with the freshman year. They started with bring your own device, and now they're through the junior year. But what they found is all the seniors have them now too. So it's pretty much the building is pretty much 1-to-1 at this point. One note to kind of piggyback on what George was saying is that I was in Salt Lake about a month ago, and Ken Grover, he just started Innovations High there, and he bought 100 MacBook Pros. Big bucks. So he has 180 students, and so he had 100 of these, and the students could check them out. They had to check them out, bring them back each day. And he's only lost one at this point. Everybody in the district thought, you're going to lose these things like crazy, but he's only lost one. And then he also did something else where he set quite a bit of budget aside for connection. So students could go home and work an extended day, Saturdays, Sundays, all sorts of things. And he says he hasn't spent a dime out of that money, even though he said he feels like a car salesman. I'm like trying to get people to buy into it. It's a $9.99 connection, thing. He goes, well, I'm thinking I'm going to spend $120, per kid type of thing because they have a lot of free and reduced lunch. And he goes, just haven't spent that. And he's thinking that internet connection is of high importance to families. So they make sure that they have that internet connection, above other things. So I thought that was kind of an interesting concept. But the parents, he said that they come back with like parent-teacher conferences and stuff like that. They said they're so thankful to have that computer come home, and they're going to make sure it goes back the next day, just because they don't have one at home. So they're able to access, and it's kind of a neat thing. He said because the students are teaching their parents how to use the computer and how to do email and how, so they're much more connected than they used to be. So it was kind of a good experience for all the way around. But it's cool data that he's got.
The idea of bringing your own devices to help with the change, what's the thought behind, in terms of, for example, I have a tablet at home, and my 4th grade son, if I had heard for next year, if they say, hey, to help us out, let's get started, could you bring your own device? And I clear it off to the point where, it's pretty empty. What is the thought on the panel for trying to get students to bring their own devices to really start that, and to encourage, of course, the idea then of going home and continuing their education that way?
So the pro of bring your own device is you save money, right? It's the easier way to get to a 1-to-1 or something close to a ratio where students have access to devices and then you're not having to pay for it all, right? That makes intuitive sense, and to the degree you live in an area where you have students of means that by and large have their own devices already, then that to some degree makes a ton of sense, right? Why should the school district subsidize and provide a device that the student already has and the parents are already willing to provide to them? The downside are a few. One is that we're locked in this really kind of challenging world where some of the world, particularly the iPad-related world, is tied to apps. So to the degree that your school is iPad-centric and you're using those apps, great. But if you're not, your child bringing an iPad to a school that is using primarily web-based tools or Flash-enabled tools like a Dreambox, it's actually not going to be helpful. So thinking through the implications of bring your own device and really thinking through kind of the nitty-gritty of what types of hardware do your students have and does it actually match with the needs, the instructional needs of your program is really important. And the most important thing to emphasize and to overemphasize is that not every student has his or her device, and expecting parents that don't have the means to provide that device is a real challenge. And I think we just need to be clear about that and not create a dynamic in which students that don't have means, don't have access to connectivity, and don't have access to devices are somehow left behind. So I get really nervous when I hear about the notion of flipped classroom when students don't actually have a device or connectivity at home to watch the videos that their teachers are assigning. And I hear flip comments when people say, well, they can just go to the library and watch it, right? Well, maybe, but maybe it's not the case that your students that come from low-income areas actually can get to the library after school. So I think what I would overemphasize to this group is really think through all the implications, particularly whether or not your policies are putting low-income students at a disadvantage. And to the degree you can mitigate those challenges on the front end by either providing devices, by helping students get access to connectivity when they don't have it, then I think it gives students a fair shot. To the degree you're not, please do. Like, for the sake of kids, please think about those things.
Yeah, I would like to add to that, if you don't mind, though, but if your choice is no program or a bring your own device program, I'd go with bring your own device program. And in terms of if you're dealing with a community that a lot of the kids may not have access, I guarantee you there are communities in Colorado that, you know, some people have 3 devices and are wondering what to do with their old ones. And if you somehow got the word out there that this school in this place is trying to do its bring your own device program, if you have an old laptop, an old tablet, or something like that that you'd be willing to donate to it, you would probably end up getting something in everyone's hands, because I think something is better than nothing. And you certainly have to think about all the challenges of what you're actually going to be able to give kids access to. But I think in 2013, something is better than nothing at this point.
Yeah, if I can add one more thing. One of the things that we talked about with we have the accelerated reader program, and we also had a fund to get books in the classroom, and so I went to the funder and said, well, instead of having hardback books, you know, what do you think about having ebooks? So now we put about $20,000 into ebooks on that one. So it's growing. You know, we still have the students that don't have access to that. So I have the hardback, but now I'm starting to see more students. Last year, if you would ask me that question, I would say, well, safety reasons, can't do this, can't do that, shouldn't, you know, keep those things at home. But now I'm starting to see that parents are being educated on how to better utilize the tools with the, you know, phones or a tablet and everything else. And once parents start seeing that, it's going to grow.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we started a school this last year, and we also have half sets of computers in each of our classrooms. We use a rotational model. And as we're looking at that, we're going through getting an estimate of what it was going to take to put into 22 classrooms, which was pretty expensive. And we ended up finding a thin client solution that we went with, which was less than half the cost of using desktops or notebooks, and even less than putting iPads in the classroom. So it's actually worked out really well. And if anybody wants some information, I'd be happy to share that.
I mean, as the Gates Foundation representative, I probably will get shot for saying this, but I mean, the huge number of, given the fact that the world is moving to software as a service and cloud-based access, things like $199 Google Chromebooks are proliferating rapidly throughout education. So, I mean, the idea that every school needs a kind of MacBook Air or something like that costs north of $1,000 is kind of ridiculous. I mean, most of these schools that are using blended learning applications, by and large, and not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, they're really just using it to access the internet. And in that case, a thin client solution or a Google Chromebook or something at a $199 a pop is actually fairly reasonable to consider, and something that amortized over 3 years is $60 a year, $65 a year. That's actually relatively small and can fit in the operating budget of most schools. So
less than a language arts textbook.
Yeah, seriously, right?
And I was just going to add to Scott's point, what we're looking at for next year's, we found that having half class set of technology helps. In some cases, it's helpful to have a full class set. And so there we're looking at getting some laptop carts with the Chromebooks that can come in and supplement. But instead of needing a whole class worth of Chromebooks, it would just be half, along with a thin client to help with that.
So maybe when we shift the conversation a little bit, so we've been talking about the budget side, the technology side, let's talk a little about the human capital side. And so maybe, question for the panel, maybe Michael, you could start talking about what have you seen in terms of the human capital challenges that districts face, and you're working with some of your clients, what kind of challenges have they seen in change management, and what kind of things have they done to try and make that a little smoother?
Absolutely. I alluded to this earlier. I think you can't. We're so excited to think about the technology, and I think obviously it's an important aspect of it. But when you think about really successful blended learning, it does come down to the teachers and the students. Really, they're the two that are most impacted by this, and the change that occurs to the way teachers teach. The good thing that we're seeing is that most teachers involved in blended learning are re-energized because they're actually teaching more effectively. They're reaching students in ways they never did before. So there's the great opportunity to have the teaching experience that they always wanted they never could before. To do that, obviously, they're doing some new things, and they need to be supported in that, whether that's new ways of being lesson planners and designers that they weren't expected to do before, new technical skills that either they didn't have or they had but didn't know how to apply effectively. Really being flexible. I can't stress enough that in a blended learning environment, given that this is still a very early space and there's a lot of change on a constant basis, to be flexible. And I think that it's important for schools to support that flexibility, to find people who are flexible to start in the pilots, and to reward that too. And I think the other thing, I think this was today or yesterday, the stress of rewarding failure and rewarding, things that don't go well, because too often, obviously in education, it's all about the success, and the only thing that matters is the grade or the assessment at the end. But this is a messy process, and it's going to take a little while, and we need to let people take risks and try these things out. And schools, leadership needs to support teachers who are willing to do that too, and students who are willing to do that. There was a recent article, I'm trying to remember where it was, about students and their perception on devices in the classroom, and we assume that it's always positive, that they love to have technology, and that's not always the case. I mean, we want these self-directed learners, we want students to utilize and engage in technology, and they probably are using it quite a bit in their own lives, but we can't assume that that's going to happen right away. And in the same way, we can't assume that a new teacher in their early 20s is going to jump right into using technology. I think we have to make sure that in all these transitions that we support the staff, the teachers, the students in this transition. And I think it's very important, like I say, to plan out what that's going to look like, to plan out the time to really get people comfortable with the change, and to really explicitly with students teach them how to become these great self-directed learners that we know they're capable of, but they, particularly if they've been in our school systems for a long time, don't know how to do because they've not been told or they haven't been given the opportunity to learn how to be self-directed learners. So I think it's always important both to support the staff, the teachers for sure, but also thinking about the students in this process as well.
Great. Other thoughts from other panelists in terms of your experience in trying to get change management to work?
I'll jump in. And, if you think about when we decided to go to the moon, how do you plan staff development for that to do something you've never done? And that's I mean, every day that's what we deal with in education and blending technology into teaching. And one thing, I really like what you said about rewarding failure is, can you imagine how many rockets we blew up on the launch pad until we were comfortable with one that we felt was safe enough to put people in and send them out into orbit? That's the exact attitude you have to take, is we're going to have some failure as we go. But I think the key to this is something that you're probably already doing in your districts, and that is good quality professional learning communities. If you got good quality professional learning communities going, then you can start bringing in some pilot programs and have what the people learn share out in those professional learning communities. And the problem you're going to have is not so much whether my folks are ready to do this, but am I ready to do it, because they're going to be knocking on your door asking you to fund it and to expand it out to their classroom as well. That's my feeling.
The one thing I'd add, one of the schools that we work with, Summit Public Schools in the Bay Area, I think has done a really good job of incorporating user feedback, both from a teacher perspective as well as a student perspective. So to hit on both the points that Michael made, right? I mean, your first implementation of this isn't going to be all roses, right? I think we've established that. That was the point I made in the introduction. But the idea of not waiting a full year to say, oh, didn't quite work how we expected it, but rather on an ongoing basis, and very, very frequently in the beginning, they had a very conscious effort to reach out to their teachers. Even before they launched, it was a co-design process with their instructional staff. They launched, then they had user feedback sessions where they said, what's working, what's not working, what can we tweak? And it wasn't just minor tweaks, it was substantive changes to the model on the fly to really improve in real time. And that was both based on teacher feedback and student feedback. In the student feedback, I sat through a session that was just fascinating. I mean, it is always fascinating to me when you actually talk to students and hear what they have to say. And one thing they did very tactically was they asked their students, rate this, give us an A through F on the idea, the vision behind this. And students said almost universally A, B, like, we really love this notion of personalized learning and self-paced learning. This is fantastic. I love that you're giving me ownership of my learning. This is how learning is supposed to be. And then they asked, how would you rate the implementation? And there were visitors in the room, and so they were like, B minus. But apparently when we weren't in the room, they gave them a C or maybe a D plus, that kind of thing. And it was great. I mean, that's great feedback. So what they knew is we're heading in the right direction, but we need to work on this. And Diane Taverner, the CEO, says that they have iterated the model 67 times. I don't know what that actually means, but 67 times over the course of this year's implementation. So I think that's a model, and there's some more information about Summit and how they went through this user feedback process that may be helpful as you guys think about implementing similar approaches.
I guess the way I look at it at the principal level at public school is we had to set the sense of urgency. I mean, that's the part that we were really, I try to push hard on, is that we had, like I said earlier, we were working hard, but we weren't getting the results. And then back on the rocket ship thing, I just go back to the Apollo movie, and failure is not an option. So we go back to this is what we're married to, this is what we're going to do, and to really push that achievement for the kids. I'm very passionate about the blended learning. I'm glad my whole staff is on board on it, but because it doesn't make sense to what we were doing in the past. It's a factory model. So 30, and you're moving, putting the tires on, you're putting the engine on, all that stuff, and we really got to move away from that, because learning is nowhere near that. When you walk into a blended learning classroom, you really see more students actively engaged, and you see more of that differentiation. But I go back to, if we continue doing what we were doing before, it's not really meeting the needs of the kids. So the big thing is, number one thing I'd say is, set the sense of urgency of why we need to move that, because that's how kids are learning, these days.
Great. Other questions? This is your last chance.
Yeah, I've got time for one more.
Chance. Otherwise, you're off on your own for implementation. Everybody's ready. All right, well, then the last question I'll ask then. Nobody? Last chance? All right, would just be, so just the last thought from each of you. If you were sitting out here recommending for these folks to say, okay, now it's time to move forward, and you think about the path you've been down and the mistakes that you've made along the way, what's the one last piece of advice you'd have for them?
You want me Start.
If you're ready, fire away. You only got 30 seconds each, so keep it
Okay,
crisp.
I'll do my best there. Well, it's jump in. Find an area in your curriculum, if you're doing this in something that looks like a traditional school, where you need better resources to support learning, and whether it's small scale. The idea, by the way, of maybe if your average class size is 20, 25, getting 5 devices and some very good content on that, so that kids could at some point during the day rotate through and work on good practice skills, or work on something that maybe advances their learning a bit. It's just jump in and do it. Put your stars on it to get it going, and then share it out amongst your professional learning communities, so folks can figure out how to get it more embedded in the entire system.
You're up.
I think we need to get our teachers ready to be comfortable with change, in that if we as the leadership choose a model, be ready to not use that model wholeheartedly, because the teachers will want to innovate a little bit to the left and right of that, and we got to give them some of the autonomy that we give them today. The fact is that when that door closes on their classroom, how many of us really know what's going on in there every day, every minute? So we have to educate them about what it is we want, and like Alex was talking about, it's that the leadership behind this vision, and then allowing them to innovate behind that. And get your flag out there far enough so people know the direction you want to go, but then allow them some autonomy to work within that and get comfortable with it. You can't expect a teacher who's kind of on that 20% of the resistor side to just be fully ready to implement right away. Allow the evolution of the teacher to get used to it a little bit, and we as educators have to also get comfortable with that we're not always in charge, that we're not always the ones that are giving the information to students. The information the students self-select is more powerful than what we tell them all the time.
So I have kind of 2 pieces of advice. One is give students access to content that allows them to self-pace and see what happens. So if I could, cite Khan Academy as one example, although there are many that you could use. I think it's easier done in math than it is perhaps in other subject areas. The schools that I've seen that have allowed kids to get onto Khan Academy and go at their own pace, regardless of what grade level they're supposed to be on, they start having this really interesting reaction. They say, well, on one hand, we've got this pacing guide that tells us to lecture on the quadratic equation on day 32. And then we've got kids that are doing fractions on the low end and L'Hopital's rule and calculus on the other end. Why the hell are we continuing to lecture on the quadratic equation on day 32? And then allow those teachers that have that aha moment the flexibility to rethink what math class might look like, and use that, the coalition of the willing, the people that are really interested in rethinking school, to go forth and give them flexibility and some autonomy to be able to do that. So that's one. The other piece of advice is give your instructional team time to just design school from scratch. Like, don't be constrained with bell schedules or anything like that. Give yourself a full day and give your leadership team time to say, what are we trying to accomplish at the end of this trajectory? And let's backward map and figure out what school might look like to better serve the students that we have, and think about the design of school around a few student types that you might be serving. So the student that comes in 4 levels behind, the student that might be accelerated by 3 grade levels, and try to design a school that adequately meets the needs of all those students and achieves the goals that you want at the end, and give yourself that freedom to do it with a blank slate, not at all connected to your current design.
Well said. I would start with what do you have? What do you have in the building? That was the number one thing I'd look at. And then how are you using it? You know, is it being used effectively? Or are they just sitting there? You have computers sitting there. I mean, you have $1,000 sitting in some of those classrooms that aren't even being utilized. Why not? And then ask the teachers and ask the students, well, how can we better utilize these resources? Because a lot of times we have the resources in the building, and really take a hard look on how you can reallocate those. Also, put the right people around you. Get your stars. Get your people that are really into the technology, and start building that out. And the number one thing before I ever started the blended learning, I've talked to my leadership team on this, is before we even mentioned blended learning, I wish I would have focused on lesson planning. I wish I would have just focused hard on that. What does a good lesson plan look like? Because that would have made the transition even easier going into the blended learning components, because guess what? The teachers have to develop those, the Moodle, or develop the, know which resources to use for which individual students, but it goes back to a highly effective lesson planning, and that's the thing that we're going to focus on for next year.
I think the only thing I'd add is, don't feel like you have to do this on your own. I mean, there's so many great resources. It's still maybe early in the transition to blended learning, but there's a lot that's happened in the last 5 to 10 years, or it's kind of the case studies that Scott mentioned. Other resources that are out there. The Yammer community, just hear of everyone who's been here and involved in all the rest of the C-Trust workshops. Even the Blended Learning Now site that you guys put together. I mean, all this wealth of resources that are available. So as you're going forward, obviously think radically, think innovatively, try to find out what works is going to be the most exciting new thing and useful thing for your school. But, when you start to make these decisions, you start to walk this path, there are resources, there are a wealth of resources out there. And so make sure to connect with those so you're not reinventing a wheel that has already been reinvented and may fit well for what you need moving forward.
Thanks so much. Please join me in thanking the panelists. We added an extra 2-hour panel to the. Oh, sorry, no.
So I am the lucky person that stands between you and your kids, or happy hour, or email, or whatever awaits you. Just a couple of items. There is already a feedback survey. God, were the people before me short? There's already a feedback survey in your email. I know sometimes people send you feedback surveys and you don't know if they ever read them. I take them very seriously. This is the 4th session we've done. It looks very different than the first 3, and the next ones we do will look different depending on your feedback. So please take a moment to give us your feedback. There's also a place in that survey for you to tell C-Trust and Don LK what you think you need moving forward to see if we can provide some of those supports. The second thing is the Yammer community. If you don't know what Yammer is, it's basically a closed professional Facebook. We chose it because it's free and easy to use, and it is meant to be kind of an extension of the community in this room today. So after you leave, if you have a question, if you heard about something that you want more information on, if you find something great, it's a place where you can very quickly post a comment, question, resource, and everything you heard mentioned today is already posted on that site. So I just sent you all another invitation to Yammer in case the one you got last week, you might have thought it was spam. Yeah, the slides, all the case studies, videos, resources, and if you don't see something, just shoot me an email or put a message up on Yammer. Scott already mentioned NGLC for me, so just want to make sure that you know that that is a grant opportunity that's coming up. There's planning grant applications due in April, and then full applications due in December. And finally, C-Trust is going to put together a summer institute for those of you that are really interested in coming with your school teams to completely redesign your schools. So be looking for an application from us if you're at the stage where you want to really re-envision your school for fall 2014. We'd love for you to come and join us for a week and spend time thinking about the details, where the rubber hits the road, the staffing and budgets and all that good stuff. So thank you very much for your time today, and go out and do good.